Hello, folks. Linda from Curtin Creative Gallery. I'm bringing you the first chapter of a 3-book trilogy from The Spending of a Life Breath by Amanda Grace Windward. I was told after a mini stroke that interfered with my speech that I should read out loud, and that'll improve my speech. I decided, why not read this book, this series, chapter to chapter, and see if anybody may be interested. And if so, I hope you follow and like, and we can get started. Now, the beginning of this book, it tells that the story is based on a true story of a woman who tried to give her love freely and unconditionally, often forgetting her own needs, which may have cost her a good portion of, at least, of her own life's value. This is her story told in her own heartfelt words, with all the tears, laughter, smiles, cries, and even screams. We begin with The Spending of a Life's Breath, Chapter 1, Fourth Daughter. I suppose we should start at the beginning. I was born at a home on Cobbett Street in Lynn, Massachusetts in 1948, the fourth daughter of Charles and Rebecca Kelly. It was a difficult birth, and my mother said that during the delivery, the umbilical cord was wrapped around my neck. And so each time I would work my way down the birth canal looking for the exit, the crazy cord would yank me back up like a yo-yo. After this happened a few times, my father, who had been standing beside the bed watching, fainted when he watched as the doctor had to reach up inside to unwrap the cord for me to be born. You would think that would make for a cranky baby, but they say I had big winning dimples that demanded a more positive presence in the world. After my birth, my parents bought a home on Cortlandt Street, a few streets over from Cobbett Street. It was here that there would be another event which would add to a little different shape to the direction of my life. It was just after entering first grade at our local public school. As a brand new first grader, I was very happy to meet many new friends from school who lived around the neighborhood, and Donna Goss was one of them. Donna lived at the top of the street and was to become my first best friend outside the family. As a young child, adventuring out without family for the first time, I was feeling independently excited and happy when Donna and some of my other little new school friends invited me to go and play down the bottom of my street in the old empty lot they called the field. This is where all the neighborhood children loved to play together. The field was an overgrown piece of property, not very big, but it seemed huge to us. It stretched from Cortlandt Street across to Randon Street on the next block. The grass, weeds, and bushes in the field were so very overgrown that some were so tall they topped our heads. But then again, we were only first graders, and not very tall at all back then. In the field, there was a beaten path from people shortcutting across from one street to the other. My new friends and I were there for just a little while, playing in an old broken-down car that had been left abandoned among the tall weeds and grasses. It was such great fun letting our imaginations explode as we pretended to drive the rickety old car to faraway places. Happily, deep in our fun, I didn't notice the young man who came cutting across the beaten path closer and closer to where we were. The tall grass, which seemed so high, only came up to the young man's waist at the highest. When he happened to approach in the old car, he was reaching into his shirt pocket and pulled out a pack of juicy fruit gum. Then, one by one, he offered each of my friends, a piece, and they accepted, thanking him. When he got to me, the last and newest kid to join the field playmates, he reached in to show the gum was empty, pack was empty. He told me he was very sorry and that he didn't have a piece left for me, but assured me he had another pack of gum and that I should go with him to get his gum, which was right over there, he said, pointing to a house across the field. Then he reached out with a firm hand and took my hand, saying, "Come on. See, it's just right there at the tall gray house. It will only take us a minute to go and get the gum." Soon he was pulling me along as he called over his shoulder to the others, saying, "We'll be right back, kids." This was in the fall of 1955, and back then our little minds were prepared for the stranger and our parents warned us about to look mean and scary or even monster-like, or at least somebody nobody knew. And the other children seemed to know this man. The other hiccup back then was the constant warning from our parents to always obey the elders and do as they say and be a good girl or boy. So this day, even though, strangely enough, every nerve in my little body screamed somewhere deep inside me that I didn't want to go, my mouth couldn't open to say no. I especially didn't want to cry or act like a baby in front of my friends. After all, I was a big girl now, a first grader. So I found myself being led out of the field, putting one foot in front of the other, as I tried to keep up with the long stretched legs of this tall man who was pulling me along. Obediently, I let the young man lead me through the tall grass and across Randon Street. Then we went into the backyard of a tall gray home, into a back door that opened to a long set of stairs that went way up to the top floor of the house that smelled like cooked cabbage. This house was not at all like our little cottage. We had just a couple of steps at our house in the back that led to a small coat room, then straight into our warm kitchen that always smelled like fresh baked cookies or bread. All this to retrieve a piece of gum. Knowing what I know today, I can see how lucky I was that an instinct for survival kicked in at that time. And although I had to suck back tears, so I was convincing enough when I promised I would not tell, so that he would finally let me go after he was through with me. It was growing dark when he led me down the long staircase and back into the very crisp fall air, which slapped a cruel sting to my eyes, making them blink and threaten to form the tears that I had been fighting so long to keep hidden. The young man had a very firm grip on my hand, and as we continued to walk across Randon Street and back into the field, once again towards the path, he gave my hand one last squeeze and then one harder, and when he asked me one last time if I was going to tell, I was all choked up inside, making it difficult to speak. It's crazy strange how at such a young age I somehow knew I had to disguise my true feelings. So I let my big dimples speak for me as I unwrapped the gum he had just given me and popped it into my mouth. Then I shook my head no and squeezed out the words, "I won't tell." Once I did that, he finally let my hand go, and at first I walked very slowly, sort of trudging to get through the path. I kept my head straight ahead and my arms awkwardly held straight down to my side like a little toy soldier. A large lump in my throat made it difficult to breathe, chew, or even swallow the gum which lay dead in my mouth. So I mostly tried to hold my breath. I did this for what seemed like a long while as my little legs pushed my feet forward. Once I had gone a ways, I could feel a chill climbing up my back and let out a burst of breath. My teeth were chattering through a tightly clenched jaw, and an uncontrollably terrible tremble took over my whole body. The juicy fruit gum he had finally given me, which I had mechanically unwrapped and shoved into my mouth, lay tightly in my clenched teeth. Unchewed in my mouth, I would not chew. I could not chew. And I decided at that moment that as soon as I could, I would spit the gum out and never, ever chew gum again. It was getting dark, so dark the field was filled with spooky shadows, scary and empty of human life, except my own, and the young man watching me across through the lonely field. My friends were all gone. They had all been called home for dinner, and I was more alone than I had ever been in my whole life. The field no longer felt fun or safe. The evening shadows loomed like ghosts in the wind. Wild grasses and sharp thorns from the overgrown weeds attacked me along the way, whipping across my bare legs. As I reached the halfway mark, I was too frightened to look back, fearing the young man, still watching, would come running to catch up with me. Instead, I began to walk a little faster and then faster still, until almost causing myself to stumble over the thick vines that stretched high and low across the path. As I hurried my walk, I felt a sticky substance between my legs that was causing a chafing, burning between my thighs and making it more and more difficult to walk, but I did not want to slow down or stop. The burning reminded me of when I was very young, playing in the dirt, making mud pies with my little sister in my backyard. I was having so much fun, too much fun to stop when I had the urge to pedal. Not wanting to stop, to run into the house to go to the bathroom and panties wet, I continued to play until my thighs burned from the drying pee that had run down my legs. This burning while walking through the darkened path of the field seemed to hurt even much worse than even that. Yet it did not stop me or even slow my pace, which was now quickening to an awkward straddle, bordering on a straight-out run. The wind-blown chill in the air alerted me to the uncontrollable tremble that began deep inside my body and spread out to the tips of my skin. I continued to feel it grow till my teeth beat against each other in such a strong, fast chatter I felt they would break, while still holding tight to the gum in my mouth. The shadows that were cast by the old car and other abandoned junk in the field looked like monsters coming to get me. I feared the winding fallen branches that tripped me up a few times, might even be snakes. It was the longest and hardest short distance walk I had even taken ever, or would ever take in my life. My heart beat faster and faster because the field seemed endless. Then finally, at last, my feet hit the cement on the Cortlandt Street side. By then, my legs were doing their best to run full out. I turned my head to see if the monster was still behind me, but I saw just blackness, still, and trying desperately to hold my breath, to stifle a scream that welled up in my throat, threatening to escape through my lips. What if he heard me and run to stop me before I could get to the safety of my home in arms of my mother? The darkness felt thick like a dark wool blanket, making it too difficult to see very far ahead. But even though I couldn't see it, I began to feel a heartfelt tug of my home pulling me. Then my mouth opened in a gasping sob, sending the unchewed gum flying into the gutter of our street. A deep fear and sadness had suddenly set itself free. A flood of wet tears began to free flow down my cheeks. My eyes, wet with tears, could not see, but ears then heard a familiar voice calling out to me. Mandy, my sister Cheryl was calling crossly. Where have you been? I squinted, squeezing the tears from my eyes, and then I could see Cheryl running down the streets towards me. She soon saw I was not okay, and she scooped me up into her arms and quickly carried me home. My mother, who had been waiting on the front porch, took me from Cheryl. At that time, two of my older sisters, who had been out looking for me, came running down from the other end of the street. They had seen my friend Donna, who told them I had been down at the field. My mother carried me into the house. My father was working the 3 to 11 shift and was not home at the time, but Mum called him and he came straight home. I cried and cried in the safety of my mother's arms. I cannot really remember telling her about what happened, but I must have, because the next thing I remember was several tall policemen coming to the door and taking me with them into the front seat of their police car. They drove me to Randon Street to point out the house the young man took me into. I remember being so terribly cold and trembling uncontrollably still. I turned to see two policemen putting the young man into the back seat of the police car. Was that why I was put in the front seat? I wondered. There was a policeman sitting on both sides of the young man in the back seat, and I was in the front with the policeman who was driving the police car. I don't know what happened to the young man after all that. The next thing I remember was being driven back up the street, driving past my house, then taking a right and driving up a big hill to the top, a big old building way up on top that had a steep driveway that caused the car to tip front end up. I was told years later that it was the old Union Hospital. The policeman brought me into a huge room with bright lights and a lot of long white curtains surrounding many metal tables. Then someone picked me up and laid me down on a cold, high metal table with a sheet on it, and removed my clothes, and then covered me with a sheet. Sadly, I don't remember seeing my mother. There were just a lot of policemen standing all around me as a man in a white coat came over and began pulling the sheet up to examine me. Taking my panties off, he then bent my knees and opened them wide. Once again, I had to hold my breath and try not to cry or scream, having no control over what was happening to me. In between pinching and hurting, I would gasp to steal a breath, trying to hold back my sobs. The long white curtains that were hung around the metal table I lay on were open wide. I think now it must have been for the policeman to witness my exam. There were always many also many white curtains hung along the walls. Some curtains sectioned off many other metal tables, but offered very little privacy in the huge open room. Around my table, the curtains were pulled wide open. It must have been so very cold. I did my best to continue holding my breath and as if it was the only thing I had any true control over. I don't remember what was being said among the people around my bed. I tried to hold back the sobs, but no matter how hard I tried, I would have to let out a gasp of air in here and there. But the warm tears escaping my eyes seemed my only comfort, so I let them flow as I stayed as silent and as good a girl as I could manage. The light overhead was uncomfortable. It was bright and stung through my tear-soaked eyes. There were lots of big, hissing, old, ugly pipes hanging down from the ceiling above. So I found it better to just shut my eyes tight and wait for it all to be over. I know now I was really trying to shut out helplessness and pain and everything else, including the memory of that day. And I guess it kind of worked because I ended up having no memory of the event for several years after, at least for the next 5 anyway. Kids can be so resilient, but I guess blocking out unpleasant memories cannot always last forever. For 5 years later, it was as if all my memories of the event were wiped out of my fragile brain. So I continued like any happy, dimple-faced, innocent child, free to love life, pushing away all thoughts of past or fears of the boogeyman. Life went on. But there was something a little different about the smiling, dimpled face, smile, and eyes of that day. As I now look back at the pictures of myself that growing years of my life, I can detect a hidden secret in those downturned eyes. If we start with my pictures before first grade, you see a sweet, happy child with a winning smile, big dimples, and dark but twinkling happy eyes open wide to the world and its wonderment. Then, when you look next to the end of the year, first grade picture, and then the years to follow, although you can still see the winning smile with great big dimples, you then see how the eyes no longer have a happy twinkle and are turned down with dark hidden secrets, replaced by an unrevealing sort of blank stare to create a door that stays shut to allow a child to grow by holding back unpleasant memories that may be too impossible for a youthful mind or spirit to understand. This is the end of chapter 1 of The Spending of the Life's Breath by Amanda Grace Windward. I hope you are interested in seeing more. I do hope to continue with my practice of reading out loud, and I'd like you to sit. Then we'll move on, hopefully, to the next 2 books of the trilogy, the story of this woman's life. Finding My Path to a New Normal is book 2, and Shall I Continue is book 3. If interested, please consider liking and following as we read on in the next videos of The Spending of a Life's Breath by Amanda Grace Windward. This is Linda of Curtin Creative Gallery saying, see you later, alligator.